Training camp is on. Matt Williamson actually on location at Steelers training camp as we get ready for this 2022 season. The latest notes from the opening of every team's training camps in the NFL, the Kyler Murray contract wrinkle that is kind of blowing our minds a little bit, and Mike Sando's quarterback tears from The Athletic, which is very interesting as well. We'll get to all of it on today's Peacock and Williamson.
You're listening to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show, your daily podcast on the National Football League, powered by the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock and Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL on Twitter. Thanks for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is what we do. First of all, Matt, we've got to let the folks know that our first couple of podcasts this week, you were on vacation. We recorded these last week, and then even the divisions we talked about, like the South, John Mechie. Unfortunate story about his leukemia that he's going to have to battle now that we didn't know about when we recorded the South episode talking about the Houston Texans. And Justin Ross, the undrafted free agent wide receiver, now already out with a season-ending injury for the Kansas City Chiefs. So for those of you listening, and I've heard from some of you on Twitter, that's the reason why it sounded like we're a little bit behind. Yeah, we were a couple days behind because Matt Williamson on vacation. He was also en route to Pittsburgh to be at training camp, which I'm sure, Matt, is very nice for you to be at and get your eyes on some football for the first time in a while.
Yeah. So even to pull back the curtain a little further, one of you lovely Twitter followers, very kind about it, said, "You must be recording from vacation, Williamson. I know what you're up to because you didn't mention the Mechie news. You would have known that one when you recorded the AFC South. That's very unfortunate. So he's got an injury and now this situation. Hopefully it all turns out fine. But I mean, who the heck knows? That's tough on the Texans too. I think they had big plans for him. Maybe, not immediately, but, that's not great. But anyway, yes. So my family vacation always correlates with the opening of training camp. We go to this YMCA camp by us that our families love forever. I've been going since I was 7 years old, and my kids love it. My daughter's had her birthday there every year. My wife's highly involved with the camp. And so I was there early in the week, getting eaten by bugs and playing volleyball and doing those type of things, a little boating and whatnot. And now this morning I got up early, came flying over here to Latrobe, only about an hour and 45 minutes away or so, and went straight to my Steeler radio show. And we camp out there right at field level, big Steeler tent, broadcasting from 2 to 5 p.m. every day that they have camp. Stop by and say hello if you're in the area. It's always fun. But it's amazing, dude. I mean, the Steeler team's very young, but that's how the NFL is. There's so much turnover every year. I mean, Minkah Fitzpatrick has been a Steeler now for 2.5 years. Remember, they traded for him during the season. This is his first time to St. Vincent's College, so like everyone younger than Minkah has never been here. Amazing.
That is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to actually experience the training camp life, going away for camp is a fun thing. And so I always, am jealous of those that get to have that go away to camp, because even the 49ers camp, even though they have training camp, it's the same place they always practice anyway. So it's not going away like they used to. They used to go away to Rockland over by Sacramento when they had their games at Candlestick Park, but no more of that. I like those teams that still get away and go to another location to have training camp. Latrobe, PA.
Latrobe, PA on Chuck Knoll Field. I mean, it's unbelievable tradition here, and they've been here since the mid-'60s, and all the great players in history have been here. So it's very, very cool. But as importantly, I saw a real practice up close and everything. They practiced for about an hour and a half today, their first practice of the year. Nothing, massive to report. Trubisky's running with the ones. Pickens made some plays. Deontay Johnson's kind of doing a hold-in type of thing. Didn't do the team drills, but he's here working. But there's just a lot of buzz. It's a lot of fun. When we're done here, I'm going to go to the local watering hole and maybe run into a coach or two and all the other media guys and see what the scuttlebutt is. So I can't wait. Good stuff. Yeah, it's great.
Interested in that scuttlebutt. Tomorrow we are previewing the NFC North for the 2022 season, players to watch in camp and the preseason, or the AFC North. So we'll get your insight there on the Steelers and the scuttlebutt and all the things you're seeing there at Steelers practice, and Jesse Bates and Joe Burrow and some of those stories. So we'll wait on some of those stories for tomorrow, but there's plenty of other camp opening stories to get to today, Matt. And I think the biggest story that we've got to talk about, which is something the more I think about it, the more it's kind of mind-blowing, is that Kyler Murray contract. And the big contract is one thing. You're getting $40 million per year. It's a huge deal for a star quarterback in the NFL. But I don't know who leaked the information about the contract, or if somebody just kind of read it and found it. I don't know who broke that story about the contract and the 4 hours of study per day. But I feel like it's a big deal. I feel like it's a really big deal that they would have to put that in writing. And I think from what I understand with the story and Kyler Murray's contract, owner Michael Bidwell is the one that really pushed for that to be in there. And I thought about it. It's like, man, this is by far the biggest contract, the biggest check that Michael Bidwell's had to write to a player. So maybe like, look, if I'm going to buy big, like I want to have my, if I'm going to buy a mansion of a house, I want to make sure I've got a plumber go through there and look at the plumbing first. I've got to make sure the foundation is good. I got to make sure the roof is in tip-top shape, and you're going to sort of do everything you can to make sure you get that return on your investment. So maybe that's what it is. And maybe I'm looking too much into it, but if you have to stipulate 4 hours per week of independent film study for your quarterback, which by the way, isn't that much, you should want to have to tell your quarterback to leave football alone, more so than you have to tell him to do 4 hours of study where he can't play video games while the tape is running on the side. That's a bit of a red flag for me. I wonder about that one quite a bit, Matt. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have been stuck in the woods and out getting eaten by bugs and all that good stuff, but I've given this one a lot of thought, and I've looked into this contract and that stipulation. And first of all, I've kind of found out, and this shouldn't shock people, and I guess this is true in all walks of life, a lot of contracts out there have some stipulations that people don't bring up that are specific to that team or player, small example, Ben Roethlisberger wrecked his motorcycle that time way back when. Well, you're not allowed to do these certain activities, or no skydiving, people, and we don't want Aaron Rodgers jumping out of planes or whatever it is. So there are some strange little stipulations in some of the higher priced non-standard contracts. That's not crazy talk in the NFL. That being said, 4 hours, to your point, that makes me think he does zero. Not one or two. He does zero. He comes in, he punches the clock. If it starts at 9 and leaves at 5, he starts at 9 and leaves at 5. And I would love, Tom Brady would be the best example, but any quarterback that's in the NFL right now, if you asked them, okay, please chart your average week for me, how much extra work do you do? Whatever it is, film study, whatever, outside the facility or in addition to what you're required. I bet they would just laugh to no end that it's only 4 hours.
It's funny because they have that ability with the iPads and the tablets they give out to their players. So it tracks that time. And a famous story with the 49ers last year was rookie Trey Lance led the team and how many hours he was spending looking at that. But again, you don't know if he just has it playing and he's playing video games on the side. But clearly there was some indication there from what they already know about how often he's using this on his own, because it's all built in and they can track that stuff. So I would absolutely love to see some of those. I'm sure guys like Tom Brady is spending an insane amount of time on that. He's probably all consumed by football when it's football season and getting better and whatever the opponent is upcoming. And the classic story about Jamarcus Russell, where they had a suspicion he wasn't watching tape that they were sending with him home. So they sent him a blank tape and he came back and they asked him, hey, what'd you think about that tape, that film we sent you? He said, yeah, cool. Everything looks good. And they knew that he didn't watch it. They sent him home with the blank tape. And so this kind of feels like that situation. And that was one of the biggest all-time busts. That is the bust factor in the NFL, is if you are a quarterback that's not putting in that much work, that you're not that competitive, ultra competitive, almost broken socially human being, right? I always talk about how I feel like Tom Brady probably doesn't have any real friends. Michael Jordan doesn't sound like he has any real friends. They're too
right.
They're almost broken from a normal human being socially, and you have to be that sort of a psycho almost to be that great at a sport. Now, you're not asking players to be that, but you do need to be someone who's self-motivated and driven to go watch a lot more than 4 hours of tape every week on the upcoming opponents.
Yeah, and I'm going to get into that, Kyler, specifically. But the one thing I meant to mention before is why do you and I and all the public know about this? Did the Bidwells leak this? Did the agent? I'm sure it's not the agent. But here's the other thing people need to know is the second this contract gets signed and gets, in the end, is official. Well, every team in the league has access to it. Like, if the Cardinals sign some backup guard to a standard contract, I don't think anyone around the league is going back and reading the finer points of it. But I would imagine with a historic contract like this one or the Watson one or whatever, every cap guy in the league is going to go look and say, what's this, the Bengals have to sign Joe Burrow in a year, or the Chargers have to sign Herbert. I want to read every detail of this. So 32 teams had access to this. So this could have leaked from anywhere. So if they thought they had some secret, they're foolish. I mean, like, you're telling every NFL person that has access to this your details, so don't think you're keeping the stuff secret.
All right, more notes on that Kyler Murray contract. Some more notes from everything going on around the league. Some players not in camp, some players holding in. All of that coming up, and some quarterback tiers as well, according to execs, and as written by Mike Sando of The Athletic. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers, but I got to let the folks...
It's not Locked On 49ers, PP. You're rusty too, coming out of the woods.
I just finished recording Locked On 49ers, and then I jumped on with you. Yeah, the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. We're not just talking Niners. We're talking about the entire league here on Peacock and Williamson. You know what else I'm talking about is the newest flavor of Built Bar at Built.com. Cookie dough chunk puffs. Light, chewy, real cookie dough chunks. And of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Are you depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys? The newest flavor of Built Bar. They are delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. Built has done it again, and somehow it's all low calorie and low sugar with 15 grams of protein. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. And that's why you feel good about reaching for those Built Bars, because they are a high protein, low calorie, low sugar treat, and they always taste delicious. They are the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. So stop grabbing those candy bars, grab yourself a Built Bar and actually feel the benefits and get that energy you need to boost you through your day. And if you don't want to do the cookie dough chunk puff, tons of other flavors of bars at built.com. You can get a mixed box. If you're not sure, all you got to do is go to built.com and use our promo code and get 15% off. That is promo code LOCKED15 at built.com to get 15% off your order. Again, that is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Thanks again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day. For your second listen, you could go check out Locked On 49ers if you want. Check out the Locked On Dynasty Football podcast featuring Matt Williamson, all the other tons of great content we have on the Locked On Podcast Network. And make sure you're subscribed up to the YouTube channel. The Locked On NFL YouTube channel is the home of Peacock and Williamson, along with Locked On NFL and a tons of other great content, including the most recent top 50 impactful betting line players, line movers in the NFL as well. Kyler Murray's record in the second half of seasons is not great either, Matt. I think the number was 7 wins to 18 losses over the course of the last 3 years as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Would that lend more to a lack of preparation at the end of years than at the beginning of seasons? I don't know. Maybe we're putting too much into this, but it is a funky little contract there with Kyler Murray, and it's interesting to see how this all plays out in any future, because as soon as things like that start happening, I feel like more and more agents and teams start putting more and more stuff in, right? We're seeing all the guaranteed money now that we didn't see before, because once one team does it, you can start asking for those types of things. I wonder if the response for teams is going to be like, okay, we want guarantees that this player's doing so-and-so here, so-and-so there, lifting weights this much, doing this much film study. I wonder if we're going to start seeing more and more of this thing.
That's very, very possible. I have a lot of concerns about this deal, big picture. I have a lot of concerns about the Cardinals. However, there has been a lot of tremendous NFL football players, Hall of Famers, that they weren't film buffs, or they went home and they didn't do football stuff, or they were just simply the most talented player on the field and they were rare guys.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many quarterbacks, though, especially in today's NFL. I mean, and I think Kyler, this is my impression of it and some secondhand information, is that Kyler has been more or less the best player on the field since he was 5 years old or whatever, and didn't have to do more. I mean, there's a lot of players that get that way. Wins the Heisman, steps in for Baker, wins the Heisman, first overall pick. Okay, has a fair amount of success at the NFL level. Why would I do more? No one's taught me to do more. Why would I do more? But he's going to have to do more. I mean, to take the next step to justify that contract, he's going to have to really advance himself, in terms of understanding defenses, and he's not going to be the quickest guy in the field forever. And to your point about falling apart late in the season, I think a lot of it is because of injuries, and I think that correlates with his size, and he's also so reliant on his feet and arm and his gifts, which he has so many of, that if he's a little injured and all of a sudden he's not the most talented guy on the field, that comes home to roost, where Brady or Dak Prescott, Dak Prescott was hobbling around last year, but he could still mentally beat you because he knows those things. I also think, Kingsbury's offense is very simplistic, and it was at the college level. Now, is it simplistic because the quarterback can't handle more? Or it's a chicken or egg thing? But it was also very simplistic at the college level. I mean, AJ Green lines are DeAndre Hopkins lines up in the same spot every time. It's very static that way. So I think teams get a beat on these guys, and over a 17-week season, you watch all this tape, and one guy it only takes to find a weakness, and if your quarterback and coach isn't adjusting to their own weaknesses and the way they're attacking it, well, you start to crumble.
More on that idea a little bit later when we check in on the quarterback tiers written by Mike Sando, as relayed by voting on by league executives around the NFL. And we started this podcast with some of the bad news with John Mechie, rookie wide receiver for the Houston Texans, and really wish him a speedy recovery with his leukemia diagnosis recently. And we'll get the other bad news out of the way here with star running back Chris Carson of the Seattle Seahawks, who's going to end up retiring now from the NFL due to his neck injury. So we weren't sure about that. There was some optimism that maybe he was going to give it a shot and try to come back, but maybe the smart move is for him to just walk away because that neck stuff it can be very serious. So unfortunately, Chris Carson, he was a fun player to watch, great story, 7th round pick, made good, and now retiring way too soon. It's for a running back a little too soon, maybe, from a neck injury now.
Yeah. I mean, he got the most of his abilities and his opportunities. He wasn't a super high pick. Put his body on the line week after week with his running style. But as you often say, I mean, that's running backs. It's not a matter of if, it's when they get hurt. And I feel bad for the guy. I don't mean to sound callous by saying this, but this came as no shock to me when I read that headline. I kind of expected that was going to be the case.
What do you think about Julio Jones to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? A little ring chasing for Julio, and I got no problem with it. And from the Buccaneers' perspective, with Julio Jones coming in on a 1-year deal, I think it's $6 million, could be upwards of $8 million with some incentives. It's a nice insurance policy for the Buccaneers with one of their star receivers coming off an injury. I guess maybe they're hoping that the combination of Julio and everybody else on their roster gives them just a rock solid number 2 option across from Mike Evans this season, just, throwing more darts at the dartboard to make sure they have more coverage there in case, one or, Godwin or, some of the other younger players on the roster, aren't up to being that starting level player for the entire season.
That's I mean, I think the logic is if we can piece 6 games of Julio and 10 games of Godwin and 17, hopefully, games of Evans and Gage.
Yeah.
And we can put that all together week to week, and week 2 might not look like week 10, but we'll piece it all together. Godwin and Gage can both be slot guys, so I really need one of those 2. I like it. I mean, I'm not going to run out and draft Julio in fantasy. I mean, I think he's a tremendous player. But I mean, equating it to like the Antonio Brown signing that they made, it's a veteran guy that Brady will trust. That's great. I just thought Brown was a much better player as a Buck than Julio will be. And I trusted Brown, even with his craziness, to be on the field more than Julio. I mean, I adore what Julio's done, but I think the over-under of games played as a Buck this year is like 6.
Yeah, Todd Bowles, the head coach there in Tampa, was basically like, well, yeah, I know he's had injury problems, but he's healthy right now, so let's go for it.
Yeah,
it's a good way to look at it. He's healthy right now, so let's try it. And, hopefully by the time he gets hurt, it's almost inevitable that Godwin will be ready, and, that they can just pass the baton, and then you're rock solid. And to me, it kind of hurts Godwin. I'm not drafting Julio. He's looking at it from a fantasy perspective, but I guess it kind of helps Brady and helps Mike Evans, because I think it, it definitely doesn't hurt either one of them. So I guess from the standpoint of Godwin and Julio, it just muddies the situation. But the other two, I think it could only either keep them the same or help. So it's for Brady and good for Mike Evans, in my opinion.
100%. And it's an aggressive organization trying to win one more ring with Brady. They're all in, so they're not caring about future cap ramifications and things like that. So I understand it. And again, if they can get 17 games out of Godwin plus Julio and some playoff games, I think they'd take it.
Thinking of some other stories around the NFL, but this one popped into my head talking about the Buccaneers was Leonard Fournette apparently was 260 pounds not very long ago, way too close to training camp. But latest reports, he's already down to 245. So that's still really big for Leonard Fournette, but Leonard Fournette's going to be bigger than most. They probably want to get another 10 pounds off there at least. 270 might be better, but 260, come on.
Right. I don't have much to comment on that. I mean, a lot of these athletes, some of them cut weight easier than others. That maybe that's not as uncommon for him to blow up in the offseason, enjoy himself, hit it hard. I mean, he's a professional, but 260 sounds rather fleshy. I don't want him looking like Eddie Lacy out there.
Right. I don't know if there's any other camp stories you want to talk about. Deebo Samuel's been a big one that's been followed. You mentioned Deontay Johnson. Both of them, it sounds like, wide receivers getting ready to go into the last year of their contracts. Both of them at camp and reported, but neither one is practicing. So the holding ins are beginning there. Yeah.
And Deontay, I mean, I sat there and watched him. He worked hard in everything but team drills, so these hold ins sometimes are different than people think. I mean, just from firsthand experience, that was the same with TJ Watt. It doesn't mean they're sitting there in sweats, just, chatting with their position coach. A lot of those guys are working hard. They just don't want somebody to step on their ankle or something in team, when there's a lot of bodies around.
Yeah. And if you're away from the team in the spring, you probably want to ramp them up slower. So Debo's just running on the side doing conditioning and that type of thing. Yeah. You don't want to get hurt while you're trying to get a new contract. And you want to make sure that when you do get in there, that you're fully ready to go.
Last thing I want to throw at you is when I read the headline, it didn't seem like a camp, a game changer at all. But Kevin Stefanski came out and said, if Watson's not playing, Brissett's our quarterback, which I think we all knew at this point. But what's really interesting to me is, including Rosen and Dobbs, who really don't matter in this equation, all 4 of their quarterbacks weren't Browns last year. And the guy they're paying the most money to didn't play any football last year. Like, just preparing Brissett and Watson will be really interesting. If Watson's there practicing, I mean, why would he not be there?
Right.
You have to treat him like the one, but deep in the back of your head, you're going, I'm going to need Jacoby in week 1, not Watson. How do I manage this, the reps with the first team?
That's really tough. Yeah. At some point, you almost have to ramp down Watson, ramp up Jacoby to get him ready, because it's going to be probably at least a half the season that he's going to have to be the number 1 quarterback. Because you got to get him those reps in camp. You got to treat him like a starter at some point.
And say what you want about Watson, and there's plenty to say about him, but I'm sure he's super excited to show his new team that he's the man, and I want every snap, and I'm in charge here, and he's that type of player, and they're paying him accordingly.
Right. And new offense, and he didn't play last year, so he needs reps too. Yeah, they almost both need full first QB1 reps, and there's not enough to go around. So I'm imagining Dobbs and Rosen are probably sitting there like, well, I guess we're not going to get any reps because it's too important to get the other guys reps.
And you don't want to throw either one out there in the second half of a preseason game when you and I are blocking for them, so that's going to be really a balancing act.
I want to talk quarterback tiers. We brought up a lot of the quarterbacks that are on Mike Sando's quarterback tiers list next. But first, I want to let the folks out there know, Matt, about Dave.
Nice.
Hindsight is 20/20, and you can't change the past. But what if you could get a little help from future you. Maybe you'd ask to borrow a little cash. Now you can with Dave. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to do whatever you need to do. Catch up on bills, fill up your gas tank, or finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch, need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app right now from the App Store. That's Dave, D-A-V-E. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. So there was the ESPN tiers that came out recently, and Sando actually used to write for ESPN and do his tiers there, and Jeremy Fowler sort of took over that. It wasn't tiers, it's top 10s is the way that ESPN they talk to execs. And I like Mike, no offense to Fowler and the ESPN crew, and maybe a little bit of playing favoritism because Mike Sando used to be a regular guest with us here on when we were doing the Locked On NFL show. But I love Mike Sando's list, and it's really fun. It's a fun way to do it, as making the execs and coaches that he's talking to pick a tier. So it's not just ranking them either. You got to pick a tier. Is this a tier 1 quarterback? Is it not a tier 1 quarterback? And again, very much like the others, and it kind of lines up with they're different people that they're talking to, but everybody's in the league. And I think the rankings come out pretty similar to what we saw with the ESPN list. And again, I think the one that causes the most argument is Lamar Jackson. He's down here at number 10. So he did make the top 10 in this list, but he's in tier 2. He's not a tier 1 quarterback. And I find that fascinating, Matt. I think we got to start there because it's obviously the one that gets the most reaction as it pertains to people breaking down quarterbacks, because some old school NFL guys just don't like the way Lamar Jackson plays, and they're never going to rank him high on their list. They would rather lose with a pocket passer than win with Lamar Jackson in his style of game.
So I'm gonna speak for Sando on this, because since these have come out, I've traveled back and forth, and I've listened to three podcasts where he's been a guest on, The Athletics, Ross Tucker's, where he's explained some of it just like how we're chatting about it, in addition to the article itself, which all of you guys should check out. And to paraphrase, and Mike, I'm sorry if I misquote you here, but he's been doing this a long time, and he always polls 50 people, quarterback coaches, a few defensive coaches, anyone, high up dudes, not random, quality control guys. No offense to those folks, but these are serious people that have been in the league a long time. So his criteria is really important here with his definition of what a tier 1 guy is versus a tier 2 guy. And he said consensus opinion on Jackson, and these are Sando's words, on the air, where almost everyone said he's a tier 1 football player, but I have to call him a tier 2 quarterback because there's one criteria here that he just doesn't meet. And a tier 1 quarterback can carry his team each week. Check. Lamar can do that. The team wins because of him. Check. Lamar can do that. He expertly handles pure passing situations. No check. And maybe that's an old school way of thinking, but Mike's brought that up many times, that the league still puts a massive premium from winning from the pocket.
Yep. And the way I've heard Sando explain it was when you take the rest away from him and you need him to make a throw to win a game. And, there's really good, smart defensive coordinators in the league. And if you take that threat of the run away from him and force him to hit his back foot and get it out, is he going to beat you like some of the other quarterbacks will?
Right.
And I think there's obviously none of these quarterbacks are perfect. Even the whoever's number
Rodgers
one,
and Mahomes.
Rodgers, yeah. They're not perfect. There's going to be, and there's some really funny anonymous quotes about those quarterbacks even too. When you start nitpicking these guys, people really raise eyebrows too with some of the quotes. But I think there's some fair criticism, obviously, with Lamar Jackson, even though people have a problem with how low he's ranked in a lot of these lists.
Yeah, he's 10 in this list, and he was 11 on ESPN's.
Right.
One of them had Prescott ahead of him. This one had Jackson ahead of Dak. I mean, the guys above him aren't bums. I mean, there's about a dozen. I think there's 11 real premium quarterbacks, and he's one of them. And okay, he's a little low. I get it, but he has a slight hole in his game, and that's part of the tier 1 definition.
And he's not the only superstar quarterback that was in tier 2. Matthew Stafford, who just won the Super Bowl, and Russell Wilson, both tier 2 quarterbacks as well, along with Deshaun Watson, who was right in front of Lamar. As you mentioned, Dak right behind Lamar in tier 2. Derek Carr, number 12 overall here in tier number 2. And then Kyler Murray, who we've talked a lot about on this episode, after Carr at number 13 in tier 2.
Yep. A couple little thoughts there just from this top group via what Mike said was he thinks usually the league takes an extra year before giving the young guys the boost. But you didn't mention Burrow and Herbert. He said the league believes these guys are legit. There's no worries anymore about either one of them. He said Stafford, if he doesn't have to win the Super Bowl, but if he has a similar year this year with the Rams, Mike believes he will be a tier 1 guy. There's just a lot of past bias from all his Lions years and hard to get that taste out of your mouth at some point, where Wilson's going the other way right now. I mean, he was a tier 1 guy or a fringe tier 1 guy a year ago, and he struggled lately. So he dropped down the list a little bit.
And Watson, prior to last year, was a tier 1 guy too, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. He was, but I mean, Mike said I didn't know how to take that one. You know what I mean? Like everyone's going to view him different. And
Watson almost just needs to be in a different category, like not applicable category for a year.
And I'm sure voters, if it's like, should I give him a 1 or a 2, probably didn't side in his favor.
Yes. Aaron Rodgers topped all the quarterbacks, tier 1. Some of the other tier 1 quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes, as you mentioned earlier, Joe Burrow, Tom Brady, doing these out of order, Josh Allen, and Justin Herbert were the 7 tier 1 quarterbacks, according to league, or 6 tier 1 quarterbacks, according to league executives. I found it interesting as somebody who covers the 49ers that Jimmy Garoppolo on a lot of these lists ranks higher than Trey Lance, even though the 49ers have decided they want to go with Trey Lance and not Jimmy Garoppolo. So I just find that interesting. And I guess again, a year too late, you can't put the cart in front of the horse, but one of the quarterbacks is a starter right now, and the other guy is kind of flailing in the wind. And Jimmy G's a quarterback 16 here on this list. Yeah,
I was a little shocked that Jimmy was quite as high as he was, especially considering he's more or less unemployed at this point. But he did mention that tier 4 is also like the incomplete grade guys. Like Mahomes after his first year was in tier 4, even though people were excited about him. Those are the incomplete grades as well. If there's one of these guys that I'm not sure about, I just haven't seen enough, they stick him in tier 4. So I think that's Lance to a T. I mean, I don't know how you could put him anywhere else. But of the guys that there's a lot to look at, I'm not saying I'm disputing it, but I was a little shocked that Jimmy was as high as he was. And I was a little shocked that Matt Ryan still is respected as he is.
Yeah, Matt Ryan coming in at 14.
Yeah.
Also, I believe, was he the end of tier 2 or the beginning of tier? Yeah, he was the end of tier 2, though. So he was still at the end of tier 2. Then it was Cousins 15, Jimmy G 16. What's odd to me, though, if these are actual coaches and league executives and decision makers around the league, and Jimmy Garoppolo is still right there in the middle of the pack, 16
That's what I was thinking.
32 starting quarterbacks, how has nobody traded for him yet?
Right. Or even Matt Ryan. They didn't give up much for Matt Ryan. If the world thinks he's the 14th best quarterback in the league, shouldn't Atlanta gotten more for him, or 5 teams been calling about him? You know what I mean? And Jimmy's the best example ever. I mean, unless that injury's really been that much of a hindrance, I think bad timing's the case with Jimmy. I mean, that if he would have been more healthy and available 2 months ago, I'm sure San Fran would have got a lot more for him or whatever. But
yeah, if he definitely was healthy throughout February and February and March when everybody else got moved, I'm sure he would have gotten as much or more than Carson Wentz. Maybe he's in Washington right now. Maybe he's in Indy already, and those other moves didn't happen. So that's and there's a lot more quarterbacks now. It's not quite a surplus necessarily, but there's a lot more quarterbacks that teams could talk themselves into being starters than maybe ever before in my lifetime. So that plays into all this stuff as well. And everyone kind of found their guy early in the offseason. Now Garoppolo's just the last one, and the chairs have been all pulled out.
Yeah, I mean, and just to come back to our full circle of how we started the show, of training camp opens and these teams have their quarterback room set. I mean, even if it's a Mason Rudolph or somebody nobody cares about, I mean, there's a no vacancy sign on these quarterback rooms because they've been investing and working on these guys forever. Like, we don't need somebody to rock the boat. We've been planning all year, all off season for this day one of starting practice. I want to see how it looks. I didn't waste all this time or, use all this time just to rock the boat,
Right. No, that's a good point. Last one for you here, Matt. I got a question for you with the tier 4 quarterbacks and some of the bottom tier 3 quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence and Trey Lance and Justin Fields, maybe 2, any of these quarterbacks. If you had to pick one, which guy's going to be tier 2 next year?
Tier 2. Your boy Lance would be pretty high on that ballot. I'm still very, very excited about Fields, but I don't think his supporting cast will allow him to get to tier 2. Lawrence is the most obvious, but I won't exactly reveal this, but go read the article. Some of the quotes about his natural ability weren't as glowing as you would think from the best prospect we've seen since Andrew Luck, but I would think Lawrence is probably the one that I would bet on if all those guys from, 20 or lower, one of them was to go to tier 2. I think I would still put Lawrence, but Lance could really be a difference maker too.
Yeah, it's so hard because Lance's situation is the best probably.
Yeah,
I would agree. Lawrence, you feel pretty clean about him as a prospect, and having now a professional coach, as defensive end Josh Allen put it at the beginning of training camp. He's like, it was just fun. Like, people, it must have been amazing to be in that locker room last year. People looking around like, what the hell is going on with this coach that we have right now? Like, how did we end up in this situation? It seems like they're so glad that they have Doug Peterson, a professional coach now in Jacksonville. And I could absolutely see him take off. I'm going to go Justin Fields just because of his talent. I just believe, it's kind of, we talk about Josh Allen and Kyler Murray. Justin Fields, maybe the 3rd fastest quarterback in the NFL, maybe 2nd fastest. He might be faster long ways than, I think, Kyler Murray's quicker, but Justin Fields 6'3". He runs a 4.4 flat, and he's got a crazy arm with crazy accuracy. Like, there's just too much there. I'm not going to believe that Justin Fields is going to fail, even though his situation is just not nearly as good as the other guys.
It's funny, as you were saying that, you mentioned the name Josh Allen. Josh Allen and Justin Fields' rookie years really aren't much different. And Allen's second year was a struggle. I publicly was saying, I don't know about this guy, And
I was not a believer in Josh Allen before the draft. After his rookie year, I thought I was proven right,
Me too.
So that was one of the most amazing, and his rookie year was probably worse than Justin Fields.
Yeah, right. There weren't many glimpses of it. Fields had some glimpses. So I think Fields is going to be a very good player.
All right, we're out of time here. Thanks, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen. We're going to check in with the AFC North tomorrow. Some insights from Matt Williamson on the division. He covers the closest, including those Pittsburgh Steelers. Joe Burrow not at camp. Jesse Bates not at camp with those Cincinnati Bengals, and a whole lot more. Talk to you then right here, Peacock and Williamson.